Hello everyone, I'm Thomas, and I'm here to teach you about the magic that is version control. This video is a surface level explanation of version control, how it works, and why you should use it. I've got some notes for a more technical explanation linked down in the description below if you're interested. Now, let's get into it. So, what is version control? Well, it's a system that keeps track of not only your project, but also the changes that are made to it over time. Version control takes a snapshot of your files and their contents every time you make a major change and saves a copy in a server that you can go back to at any time. Let's say you're working on a project and are satisfied with the work you've done so far. You would create what's called a commit. Think of this like a save file in a video game. It holds a snapshot of your project the way it is right now. This is version 1 of the project. Later, you make more changes and decide to make another commit. The project is now at version 2. Repeat this process again and we're at version 3, but it turns out version 3 has something wrong with it, and one of the changes you made broke the project. This is where you would use a process called reverting, and restore our project, currently at version 3, back to how it was at version 2. Version 3 now no longer exists, and we're free to continue with our now stable project. All of these versions combine into a timeline, which in this case is our master timeline. Alright, with the rough explanation out of the way, let's take a look at 5 uses for version control. First off, it lets multiple people work on a single project at the same time. This way, you don't have to pass around a flash drive or use Google Drive. It also prevents one person from causing irreversible damage. 2. You have a form of backup for your project. Because the files are stored in a server, even if your computer falls into a pool, your project files are still safe. 3. You can compare files to each other to see what their differences are. If you want to look at the differences between a file from version 2 and the same file from version 3 to see what broke the code, a version control program can highlight the differences in each line for you to show exactly what's different between them. 4. If something breaks and would take more time than it's worth to repair by hand, there's an easy way to reset it. This is what reverting is for. You basically just restore your project by loading a save slot and continue working from where you left off before everything broke. And 5. You can organize your project based on new features being added, or whatever each developer is working on individually. This is called branching. It's really cool and really important, so let's take a look at it now. So, remember that change you made before that turned the working version 2 into the broken version 3? Let's say that was a new feature you want to keep working on, but didn't want to risk breaking the main project again. The answer to this dilemma is called a branch. A branch is basically a parallel timeline that offshoots from the main timeline at a specific point. This branch is devoted to making a new feature that we'll call Feature A. In this branch, we can make as many changes as we like without the possibility of messing up version 2, which we know is stable and working. It also allows us to take our time in developing this new feature, allowing the rest of the team to continue working on the main timeline. Once the feature is completed and we know that it works, we can then merge this branch back into the master timeline, which will give everyone else in the project access to the new feature. It will then also be included in future versions, like the new version 3 here that's created when we merge. Before we finish up, let's talk about a few keywords that are going to be tossed around a lot with this subject. First off, what's a server? Well, a server is basically a computer somewhere in the world that holds your project files in a repository. Okay, so what's a repository? A repository, or repo, is a folder that holds not only your project files, but also the commit history of that project. Great. What's a commit history? Okay, so everyone calls this something different, but I'm going to go with that phrase. The commit history is the map of timelines we saw earlier. It is the history of all the commits you or any of your teammates have made on this project. Okay, we talked about this earlier, but what is a commit? Well, it's basically, again, the snapshot of your project made every time you want to save your current progress. Every time you make a new commit, a new version has been created and added to the commit history. When you make a commit, you have to title it and can give it a description. This is so you can later on easily find out what files were changed in each commit and the purpose of those changes. So don't just title your commits, I changed things. Be specific, it could really be helpful later on. Okay, that's enough for right now. Next time we'll go over the biggest question I had when I first started learning about this subject. What exactly is Git? Until then, have a good one.